In the remote village of Ravensmoor, nestled deep within a forest shrouded in perpetual mist, stood the decaying remains of the Blackthorn Manor. The mansion, once the grandest in the region, had fallen into disrepair, its walls overrun with ivy, and its windows shattered like the hollow eyes of a skull. The villagers spoke of it only in whispers, for the name Blackthorn was one that conjured fear, and with good reason. Generations ago, the Blackthorn family had been a source of terror for the village. Wealthy and powerful, they were known for their cruelty and their insatiable hunger for control. The head of the family, Lord Vincent Blackthorn, was a man of unspeakable evil, rumored to dabble in dark rituals and blood magic. He ruled his family with an iron fist, instilling in them a thirst for power that would transcend the grave. It was said that one fateful night, after the Blackthorns had overreached their bounds, a group of villagers, desperate and enraged, stormed the manor. The villagers believed they had ended the reign of terror, burning the mansion to the ground with the family still inside. But they were wrong. The Blackthorns did not die that night. Instead, they were cursed to remain within the ruins of their manor, their spirits twisted by the dark rituals they had practiced in life. Bound to the land that had once been their kingdom, they became a family of ghosts, more bloodthirsty and vengeful than ever before. The Blackthorn ghosts were unlike any other. They fed on fear, growing stronger with every scream that echoed through the crumbling halls of their home. But their true hunger was for blood, a craving that had only intensified in death. They would lure the living into the manor with whispers carried on the wind, the faint scent of roses masking the stench of decay. Once inside, the unfortunate souls would find themselves trapped in a nightmare, unable to escape the clutches of the vengeful spirits. The villagers knew better than to venture near the manor, but there were always those who were drawn to the mystery, to the tales of hidden treasure and ancient curses. And so, the Blackthorn ghosts were never without prey. It was a cold, moonless night when a group of travelers unfamiliar with the legends of Ravensmoor arrived in the village. They were weary from their journey and sought shelter, but the inn was full. Hearing whispers of an old mansion just beyond the forest, they decided to seek refuge there, despite the warnings of the innkeeper. As they approached the manor, the air grew colder, and the mist thickened, swirling around them like a living thing. The gates of Blackthorn Manor creaked open on their own, inviting them in. The travelers hesitated, but the promise of warmth and shelter was too tempting to resist. They crossed the threshold, and the gates slammed shut behind them. Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of shadows, with corridors that twisted and turned in impossible ways. The walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and the air was thick with the scent of roses. The travelers felt eyes on them, watching from the darkness, and the faint sound of laughter echoed through the halls, laughter that was both cruel and hungry. One by one, the travelers disappeared, their screams swallowed by the manor. Those who remained tried to escape, but every door they opened led them deeper into the heart of the house where the Blackthorns awaited them. The last traveler, a young woman named Eliza, stumbled upon a hidden chamber. In the center of the room stood an ornate mirror, its surface covered in dust. As she wiped it clean, she caught a glimpse of movement behind her. She turned, but there was nothing there, only shadows dancing on the walls. But when she looked back at the mirror, she saw them, the Blackthorn family, standing together, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light, their mouths twisted into predatory grins. Eliza tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. The ghosts moved closer, their reflections growing larger in the mirror until they stepped out of it, their cold hands reaching for her. She felt the life draining from her, her blood turning to ice as they fed on her fear. Just as the darkness began to close in around her, she heard a voice, soft and pleading. "Join us," it whispered. "Become one of us, and you will never fear again." With her last ounce of strength, Eliza managed to tear herself away from the mirror and ran, her heart pounding in her chest. She fled through the corridors, the Blackthorns in pursuit, their laughter echoing in her ears. But the house had changed. The way out was gone, and every step she took led her deeper into the manor, until she found herself back in the hidden chamber, the mirror waiting for her. She could feel the Blackthorns closing in, their breath cold against her neck. Desperate, she reached for the mirror, hoping to shatter it, to break the curse. But as her fingers touched the glass, it rippled like water, and she was pulled inside, her scream echoing in the silence. The mirror stilled, its surface smooth and unbroken, reflecting the empty chamber. In the village, the innkeeper watched the mist roll in from the forest, thicker than before. He crossed himself and muttered a prayer, knowing that the Blackthorn Manor had claimed more souls that night. And somewhere in the darkness, the Blackthorn family waited, their hunger growing, their numbers swelling. For there was a new member of the family now, a young woman with haunted eyes and a scream that could never escape her lips. And the Blackthorns were always hungry. Weeks passed since the travelers vanished, and the village of Ravensmoor settled back into its uneasy silence. But the disappearance of Eliza and her companions did not go unnoticed. Her brother, Thomas, a seasoned investigator with a stubborn streak, arrived in Ravensmoor, determined to uncover the truth. Thomas was a man of logic, a skeptic who dismissed tales of the supernatural as mere superstition. He had heard the stories of Blackthorn Manor, but he believed there was a rational explanation for everything. The villagers, however, refused to speak of the manor. Their fearful glances and hurried steps only fueled his determination. Ignoring their warnings, Thomas set off towards the forest one misty evening. As he approached the manor, the air grew colder, just as it had for Eliza and the others. The gates loomed before him, and with a creak, they opened, as if expecting him. He hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. The gates slammed shut behind him, just as they had done before. Thomas, unfazed, pulled out a lantern and made his way into the house. The manor was as foreboding as the villagers had described its corridors, twisted and dark, its walls seeming to pulse with a life of their own. But Thomas was not easily scared. He moved methodically, taking note of every detail, every oddity. The scent of roses lingered in the air, cloying and thick. As he ventured deeper into the house, he began to feel a presence of coldness that seemed to press against his skin. Whispers floated through the air, indistinct and unsettling. Thomas shook them off, attributing them to the wind. But then he found the hidden chamber, just as Eliza had. The ornate mirror stood in the center of the room, its surface pristine, reflecting the faint light of his lantern. Thomas approached it cautiously, sensing something was wrong. He looked into the mirror, expecting to see his own reflection. But instead, he saw her Eliza, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. She stood behind him in the reflection, though when he turned, there was no one there. "Eliza," he whispered, his voice trembling for the first time. But the image in the mirror did not respond. Instead, she raised a hand, pointing at something just beyond his line of sight. Thomas turned, and his breath caught in his throat. The Blackthorn family stood in the shadows, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. They watched him, their expressions a mix of hunger and amusement. "Join us, Thomas," a voice whispered, cold and hollow. It was Eliza's voice, but distorted, twisted by whatever force held her captive. "Stay with us. There is no escape." He backed away, his mind racing. There was no way out. He had seen the corridors shift, the doors that led nowhere. The manor was a trap, a living thing that had ensnared him just as it had his sister. But Thomas was not ready to give up. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, ornate dagger relic he had taken from a previous investigation, one said to have the power to banish spirits. He didn't know if it would work, but it was his only chance. The Blackthorns began to close in, their figures solidifying, their expressions growing more predatory. Eliza's reflection watched him with a look of desperation, as if caught between wanting to help him and being unable to. With a shout, Thomas lunged at the nearest figure, plunging the dagger into its chest. For a moment, the ghostly form flickered, its face contorted in a silent scream. But then, to Thomas's horror, the dagger turned to dust in his hands, and the ghost reformed, its grin wider than before. "Your trinkets won't save you here," Vincent Blackthorn sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "This is our domain, and we decide who leaves." Desperation clawed at Thomas. He turned back to the mirror, hoping for some sign, some clue from Eliza. But her reflection was fading, her figure dissolving into the shadows. "No!" Thomas shouted, reaching out to the mirror as if he could pull her back. But the blackthorns were upon him, their cold hands gripping his shoulders, dragging him away from the mirror. The last thing Thomas saw before darkness claimed him was Eliza's face, her expression one of sorrow, as she mouthed a single word. Run. But it was too late. The darkness closed in, and the manor claimed another soul. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk in the village. The mist grew thicker, curling through the streets like a living thing. The innkeeper watched it with a grim expression, knowing that the Blackthorn Manor had claimed another victim. But as he turned away, he noticed something different, a figure emerging from the mist, tall and broad-shouldered, with an air of quiet determination. The figure paused at the edge of the village, surveying the manor in the distance. This was not Thomas, nor anyone the innkeeper recognized. But there was something about him, something that made the innkeeper shudder. The figure moved with purpose, striding towards the manor without hesitation. The mist seemed to part for him, the air growing still. In the heart of the manor, the Blackthorns felt it to a new presence, one that was neither fearful nor easily swayed. They watched as the figure approached, and for the first time in centuries, a flicker of uncertainty crossed their faces. Whoever this new visitor was, he was different from the others. He had come not as prey, but as something else, something the Blackthorns had not encountered in a long, long time. As the figure crossed the threshold of Blackthorn Manor, the walls shivered, the darkness recoiling. The game was about to change, and the Blackthorns were no longer certain they would emerge victorious. But one thing was certain, the story of the Blackthorn Manor was far from over. As the figure stepped into Blackthorn Manor, the atmosphere shifted. The once oppressive darkness seemed to retreat, and the air crackled with a new energy. The Blackthorn family, hidden in the shadows, watched with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. They had faced countless intruders over the centuries, but this one was different. There was a strength about him that they had not encountered before. The figure stopped in the grand foyer, and for the first time, his features became clear in the dim light. He was an older man, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to pierce the darkness itself. He carried with him a wooden staff, intricately carved with ancient symbols. It glowed faintly in his hand, a beacon of light in the gloom. He stood tall and unwavering, his gaze scanning the manor as if he could see every hidden corner, every trapped soul. The Blackthorns shifted uneasily, their confidence shaken by the presence of this stranger. Without a word, the man began to move deeper into the manor, his steps deliberate and unhurried. The shadows around him twisted and recoiled, unable to touch him. He was drawn to the heart of the house, to the very chamber where Eliza had been lost, where Thomas had faced the ghosts and failed. As he entered the hidden chamber, the Blackthorns materialized around him, their forms more solid, more threatening than ever. Vincent Blackthorn stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. "What do you want here?" The man did not answer immediately. Instead, he raised his staff, and the room filled with a soft, golden light. The Blackthorns flinched, their forms flickering as the light touched them. "My name is Gabriel," the man finally said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "I am here to end the curse that binds you to this place. It is time for you to find peace." Vincent's eyes blazed with anger. "Peace? We need no peace. We thrive on fear, on blood. You cannot defeat us, old man." Gabriel met his gaze, and yielding, "Your time has passed, Vincent. You have lived in darkness for too long, consumed by your own hatred and greed. But there is another way, a way to break free of this cycle." As he spoke, Gabriel struck the floor with his staff. The golden light intensified, spreading through the room, illuminating every corner, every shadow. The walls of the manor groaned, the very fabric of the house beginning to unravel. The Blackthorns recoiled, their faces twisted with fear and anger. But as the light touched them, something else happened, something unexpected. The harshness in their eyes softened, the twisted grins fading. For the first time in centuries, they looked almost human. Eliza's reflection reappeared in the mirror, her face no longer filled with terror but with hope. "Help us," she whispered, her voice echoing in the chamber. "Release us from this curse." Gabriel nodded, his expression gentle. "I will." With a final, decisive motion, Gabriel raised his staff high and brought it down on the floor once more. The golden light exploded outward, flooding the entire manor. The walls trembled, the floors cracked, and the very air seemed to hum with the power of the spell. The blackthorns cried out, their voices a mix of anger and despair. But as the light enveloped them, their forms began to dissolve, the darkness that had clung to them for so long lifting away. One by one, they vanished, their spirits freed from the curse that had bound them to the manor. As the last of the blackthorns disappeared, the manor itself began to change. The twisted corridors straightened, the decaying walls repaired themselves, and the broken windows mended, letting in the first rays of sunlight the house had seen in centuries. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and serenity. Gabriel lowered his staff, breathing a sigh of relief. The curse had been broken, the spirits released. Blackthorn Manor was no longer a place of fear and death but of peace and redemption. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of a figure standing in the doorway, Eliza, whole and alive, her eyes filled with gratitude. She stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving us." Gabriel smiled gently. "Your brother fought bravely, Eliza. His love for you gave me the strength to do what needed to be done." Eliza nodded, tears in her eyes. "One wish I could see him one last time." Gabriel's expression softened. "You will, in time. But for now, you must live. The world is waiting for you." With that, Gabriel turned and walked out of the manor, the sunlight warm on his face. Eliza followed, stepping out into the fresh morning air. Behind them, Blackthorn Manor stood silent and still, its dark past finally put to rest. The village of Ravensmoor awoke to a new day, the mist that had hung over it for so long finally lifting. The villagers, sensing the change, ventured out of their homes, their hearts lighter, their fears gone. And in the heart of the forest, Blackthorn Manor remained a symbol not of fear, but of the power of light over darkness, of redemption over damnation. As Gabriel disappeared into the forest, his work done, he knew that the story of Blackthorn Manor had reached its end. The curse had been broken, the spirits freed, and the village of Ravensmoor could finally find peace. But as with all stories, this one left behind a lesson, that even in the darkest of places, there is always hope, always a chance for redemption. And sometimes it takes the courage of a single person to bring light to where there was once only darkness.